All right, in this video, I'm going to show you how to utilize Cloudflare workers in order to obfuscate API keys in your iOS app or any client for that matter. This is done in order to prevent any man-in-the-middle attacks that might happen, which basically means that whenever you are sending network requests from your client to the network or server or whatever, anybody with an app like Proxyman or Charles Proxy or whatever, they can just look at the network request being made and they can see exactly what your API key is. Then they can take the API key, build their own client, and just abuse your API key and have you pay while their client functions. So you never want to do this. You never want to store an API key locally. Always want to have it come in from somewhere else so that it's hidden. These things are never completely fail-proof. There will always be some nerd who's going to be able to figure out your stuff eventually if they really, really want to try. But it's a good practice to try to mitigate that as much as possible, as soon as possible, especially for something like a small indie app like yours. So first off, to create a Cloudflare worker, obviously all of these tools, you need to install them on your own machine. But this is something that you simply need to go to cloudflare.com to just read the manual and see how to install Wrangler, which is their tool that lets you work in the terminal to set up Cloudflare Worker. So once you have it installed, you do npx Wrangler init, and we're going to call this airport provider 2. So this is just going to be an example using NASA's a picture of the day API. They require an API key, so this is why this is going to be a good example. I have workers that are way more complex than this, but I don't think showing those would be a good educational video, so I'm just going to keep it as simple as I can. Once this runs, it's going to take a while for it to set it up. It's going to ask you for some basic stuff. I've always used the hello world example. There are other things you can go and read about what those are, but you can just use the hello world example. And I actually choose JavaScript here. I'm sure you could use TypeScript or even Python. As you can see, it is in beta. I would personally wish that they'd enable Go or Swift to be used, but that's obviously a pipe dream. But I use JavaScript because I tend to just AI generate all the code needed for my worker. From my experience, every single AI tool that I've ever used, they know JavaScript the best by far. It's always Python and JavaScript. JavaScript seems to be the way to go, and I've had zero issues using JavaScript in my workers. So now I have a directory called airport provider 2. So when you make a worker, it'll create this template for you. The only file you need to be interested in is the index.js file. All this other stuff you don't have to touch at all. As you can see here, this is just a template, and what I already have in my other worker, because that's easiest, what you could do is just go to Claude or ChatGPT and ask it to write you a worker. The most important part is here. So in your fetch method, you want to make sure that both request and env are exposed, because you're going to be using the env variable to get your API key. So here I have the API endpoint. Then from the environment, we get the NASA API key that you can get from NASA's site. So you go to nasa.api and then do just normal network code, throw errors when there's supposed to be something, be a good backend developer, so to speak, for your client developer, which is yourself. You can add as many checks as you want for any requests coming in here. I can show you an example from a more complicated project that I have. So for example, here you can see that I have this rate limit thing set up. So this is just getting the Cloudflare connecting IP address, and then it's checking against that IP, and then I have separate rate limit code that again you can ask for from the AI tool. So you don't even have to know how to write this in JavaScript. All you need to know is that you need it. And then you just have to tell the AI tool that you need that, and it'll do that. And then you can just put it in here. So once you have your worker code set up, next you're going to have to add the secret key, which is the API key, to your environment. And that is done using the npx Wrangler secret put command. Since in our code we're calling it the NASA_API_key, we're going to call it that here. And then it's going to ask you for the value, which is the key itself. And I have that copied in my clipboard right now. This is something that you will get from NASA's site, and they will email it to you. Save it in 1Password or something. And then once you do this, it'll not just add it, but it'll also upload it straight to Cloudflare. Now, since we have our code, you can just commit the code. Once you've committed it, it's time to deploy it. So now you do npx Wrangler deploy, and now it'll just upload that worker, deploy it in your Cloudflare stack. And once it's deployed, you go to Cloudflare, and then here under your workers and pages, you will find your worker. So this is APOD provider 2. And here you will find the code that it's going to use. In a recent update to Cloudflare, it started adding a bunch of other stuff in this same file. I'm not sure why. I haven't even looked into it. It doesn't matter because it works. But there's also the code that you wrote is also included here. So you don't have to worry about that at all. This is just a place where you could edit the code, but I don't recommend doing that. I only recommend doing it through the CLI and locally. There's also an environment where you can test code if you want with, example post requests or get requests or whatever. Those can also be done through a curl. You can use the terminal and do a curl request, for example. Let's say, for example, that we take this and then I go here and I say, hey, give me a curl example for my worker. The URL is this. And now Cloud is going to give you a curl like here. So it's going to give you this. So let's get the APODs for these dates. And now you can just run this in your terminal and you're going to get back this. And if you have JQ installed, you could do like this. So it gives you back formatted JSON. So here we can see this, and then we can even open this and verify that this is actually working. So yeah, it's working. It's giving us back something from NASA. This is basically verifying that your worker is working. So now when you have your worker set up and you know it's working, now you can say write a simple Swift network interface for this. And you can verify that the generated model code, for example, is correct by saying, check that the model code is correct. This is what a response looks like. And now it's just going to give you the right thing. And then you can obviously just expand on this as much as you want. There you go. So now using this, your API key is never displayed to anybody snooping on your client code. It is always in your worker, and you can actually see it here by going to settings. You go to your worker, settings, and then variables and secrets. And here you can see the NASA API key, and the value is automatically encrypted. So it's not visible here until you actually want to see it. You can delete it. You can go to your CLI and delete it. So in the same worker, let's say you have, let's say you want more than just a picture of the day endpoint. Let's say you want more endpoints from the NASA API. So there's a bunch of these. So I have a tvOS app actually that's using a lot of these endpoints. It's using a James Webb Telescope endpoint as well, but that's not relevant for this video. But for example, you have the near Earth objects. That is one endpoint. You have the APODs, that is another endpoint. They all have the same base URL, but then the path is different for them. But they all have the same kind of structure where you just build a query and add the API key, etc., etc., etc. So in the same Cloudflare worker, you could do all this routing in the worker code itself. You can have multiple files. You can just go all backend, like full backend dev mode, and make your worker like super complex if you want to do that, and just put all the keys there. And this is what they call a serverless client. So this would be a serverless iOS app. Well, obviously it's using Cloudflare's backend server, so it's not technically serverless. That name is so dumb, but that's what it is. So I hope this gives you pointers, well, enough pointers at least to get started. This is really easy, in my opinion. All you need is Cloudflare, some basic idea what you want to build, the API keys that you want. You need to understand the backend that you are building. You need to understand it enough for an AI tool to be able to assist you. What I've done, for example, with OpenAI's backend, they have this thing called structured outputs, which is really complex in my opinion for a newbie. What I did, I essentially created a document for Claude and told it, hey, study this document, don't write code yet, and then let's build a Cloudflare worker for this specific task. And then we did that, and I mean, it took a couple of hours of trial and error, but eventually I got there, and now I know exactly how to make one. So now I never have to do that again. I just need to show Claude that, hey, this is how you do it. Please do it like that for this new app that I have. And now I have structured outputs. I can make structured outputs for anything, which is really powerful. So yeah, that's the video. I really think that this is something that you are going to be able to do this. I'm 100% certain of that. Just remember that in the worker code, the environment variable has to be exposed. Sometimes AI tools write worker code in a way where they don't do that. And I've never had success when doing so. I always tell them that make the code in this structure where it is exposing the environment and it's starting with the source default. I don't know JavaScript that well. I am not a professional JavaScript developer. I write Swift and Go, so don't hold it against me, but this is how you do it. Like, comment, and subscribe, and all that jazz.